whether we managed to get through the whole topic today. One thing that I wanted to mention is that the December exams are approaching fast. And I have to check when our last lecture will be, the date of our last lecture. If needs be, we need to schedule another or two other lectures, if it's okay with you. So we'll try to utilize the Friday evening slots that should be free. Have you got any Fridays that are already booked? Already? Hi, Glenn.
Alright, apparently I'm back. I should have started earlier. You were mentioning Fridays. Sorry, I just got back now.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Was you have every Friday with Jurgen or
no, just personal stuff. 26th, 19, and no, 19 should be okay actually, but not
okay?
12.
So keep 19 free.
Will do.
All right. This coming Friday, 12th.
No,
I'll try and fit another one on the 12th.
I'm sorry. You would like to do some lectures on Friday? Maybe I got it wrong.
Yes, Alexander, because the syllabus is quite tough, quite tight, and we will probably just have enough time to go through the syllabus by the end of this semester. And I would like to have at least one session revision. That's why I'm thinking of utilizing a couple of Fridays, at least one Friday.
Unfortunately, Friday 19th, you have something. You have committed to something else, and I cannot schedule.
Okay.
Because of it, sorry.
For me as well. I think I think I'll be working on up until 8 o'clock in the evening on that Friday. I can try to
Anyway,
arrange.
I'll try to come up with some dates. If not all of you can make it on a particular Friday, I can do it with two groups. I can then repeat revision. All right, or we can agree on another date where do you have any free dates throughout the week? Monday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Monday we have another class from my end, computer architecture.
Thank you.
But I guess Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday is all free for me. Evening.
Hello.
Hello.
I am back because I had to restart.
Okay. Look, I'll tell you what. I'll send an email later on to the whole class, so that I see whether there are Wednesdays and Thursdays free. That nobody has lessons there, and then I'll work around that and let you know. Okay.
Maybe we can do a poll and see who prefers which day, so we can do a democratic way.
But Alexander, if I send an email and see, because some people might have lectures on a Thursday, other might have lectures on a Wednesday.
Yeah,
So
I have usually on a Wednesday.
So I'd like to first of all try and find a day where everybody will be available. If not, I'll try and find 2 days and split you into two groups, and then have a revision session with each group. Okay?
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. So let's start off electronic commerce. And first of all, the difference between e-business and e-commerce. We had mentioned this in one of the early lectures. So basically, e-commerce is that part of e-business that is facing outside the organization. The part of e-business that deals with interaction with suppliers and customers is electronic commerce. It then expands into electronic business, where all the back-end processes are enabled digitally as well. Because you could have a situation where an organization has uh, an e-commerce site. They are accepting orders over an e-commerce site. But then those orders have to be processed manually at the back end. So that is just e-commerce. It does not translate into e-business. But if those orders are then processed electronically at the back end as well, then that is the whole picture, e-business and e-commerce. So if you have a look here above the line, we have electronic business. These are all the internal functions of the organization. Linkages with factories, business partners, remote offices, things like that. Outside the business, right, it is electronic commerce. This is facing outside, facing our customers, facing our suppliers. So there is a distinction between e-commerce and e-business. And e-commerce, we define it as the buying and selling of products and services by businesses and consumers, through an electronic medium without using any paper documents. Now, obviously, with e-commerce, there is the physical part of e-commerce. If we are buying goods, those goods need to be dispatched. Those goods can't be certain goods like software, music, books, things like that. They can be delivered electronically, but other products, clothes, for example, they can't be delivered electronically. However, the order and the payment and everything, the paperwork, the administration, is all done using electronic medium, without using paper documents. Now, although e-commerce is widely considered as being buying and selling of products over the internet, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to use the internet. If a transaction is completed through electronic measures, it can be considered as e-commerce as well. Now, we are used to the commerce buying and selling over the internet, but there are other ways of transacting commerce digitally, not just by using the internet, and that is through EDI, which is the forerunner of e-commerce. EDI stands for Electronic Data Interchange. Although we have the internet now, which is very firmly established, there are certain companies who still transact business with each other using electronic data interchange. Now that is classified as e-commerce as well. They're not using the internet as such. Now with EDI, data can only be transmitted in a pre-designed format. The two parties who are transacting business, who are sending electronic documents to each other, have to agree on a format. The good thing about the internet is that because of TCP/IP, we have a standard protocol. So we don't need to agree pre-designed formats with whoever we are dealing. Otherwise, if we are dealing with 5,000 people, we would need to have 5,000 different sets of pre-designed format documents. So with internet, right, we have a standard way of communication. With EDI, the way of communication has to be agreed between the two parties. Now, there was some standardization of formats, but the initiatives were, sometimes there were different initiatives, so there were different standards for the formats, but generally, the formats were not standard. And the way that EDI worked, before EDI, we had someone preparing a hard copy document, faxing it to, let's say this is the customer, this is the supplier, faxing that document to the supplier. At the supplier end, somebody had to pick the document off the fax machine and re-input it into the supplier's computer system. Now with EDI, the paper document is non-existent. The order was done electronically. The system at the customer end creates an order, it passes through EDI, through telecommunications, and it goes directly into the system at the supplier, at server B. Now, the benefits of EDI, first of all, cost savings. It reduces paperwork. We don't need to print paper. We don't need to send documents by fax. When we fax a document, it is printed at the other end. So another paper is created, another document is created. There are no mailing or fax costs. Not all orders were sent by fax. Some orders were sent by normal mail. And normal mail and even fax cost money. A fax call was a normal telephone call, and if you were faxing a supplier in a foreign land, that was an international call. We have reduced inventory costs. We have shortened the time between order and delivery of goods and receipt of goods, so we don't need to keep high stocks. If your lead time is 8 weeks, you need to keep at least 8 week stocks to tide you over until you receive your order. But if the lead time is reduced from 8 weeks to 4 weeks, for example, you only need to keep 4 weeks stocks. Right, so that is saving on our inventory costs. We reduce the cost of fund transfer, because the good thing with EDI is that when you receive an electronic invoice, unless someone within the organization stops payment for that invoice, let's say the people who are receiving the goods find that the goods have been short-shipped, they haven't received the quantities that have been ordered, or the quality is not good enough. So they might say, do not pay this invoice. Now, if that invoice is not flagged for non-payment, automatically, after the 30 days credit or the period of credit passes, that invoice will to the bank with instructions to pay it. And the funds will be transferred from the customer's bank to the supplier's bank. Right? Which is an easier process than somebody having to draw up documents to order a fund transfer, to order a bank draft, and things like that. Another benefit is the speed. We don't have to rely on people printing an order, faxing it. Someone at the other end might be on leave, so the fax is received but it is not acted upon immediately. It is acted upon 2 days later. Now, with EDI, because it is a server talking to another server, that communication is nearly immediate. As soon as you raise the order from the customer end, that order in a few seconds is going to go into the supplier's order book. Right? So we are bringing the timescales down. Better accuracy. We don't need to rekey in information. When we are keying in information of a document, the chances are that a human being may make a mistake. The other problem is that sometimes faxes, right, when they are printed at the receiving end, they are not that clear. So certain figures might be misunderstood and the wrong figures entered into the supplier's system. There is no loss of mail. Right? When orders were sent by normal mail, sometimes that mail gets lost. That mail takes a long time to reach its destination. Better security. We don't have hard copies lying around with people, perhaps the cleaning people. They might see an order and without knowing it, they might comment, hey, look, this company has ordered €500,000 worth of goods from this company here. So there is more security because it is passing from computer to computer. Obviously, there are security issues like hacking, things like that. Right? But as long as we have our security in place, then it is more secure to use EDI. System integration. We are integrating systems together. Systems are talking to each other. We are eliminating the need to rekey in any inputs. We get just-in-time support. If we are reducing the lead times from when we order raw materials, for example, until we receive them, then right, we can work in what we call a just-in-time manner, receiving stocks just in time for us to use that stock for production purposes. Now, talking about electronic commerce, there are different types of electronic commerce. Now, here be careful, these are types of e-commerce, they are not business models. We will be talking about business models later on today. But these are the different types of e-commerce. There are B2B, which is business selling products or services to other businesses. B2C, with businesses selling products or services to the end consumer. C2C, individuals selling products or services to other individuals. A good example here is Malta Park, eBay, right? You have received a number of Christmas presents that you don't like, that you want to get rid of, right? So you flog them on a platform like Malta Park, right? So that you are transacting business, you are a consumer yourself, you are an individual, you are transacting business with other individuals. You're not doing it as a business. And then we have eGov, which is governments enabling people to carry out electronic transactions. You can ask for, pardon?
Can I ask something quickly?
Yes, yes.
So, in the context of a company or whatever, an operation that wants to digitalize its operation,
Uh-huh.
would an EDI then fit within the context of the value chain or the supply chain,
Yes, it would. EDI,
since you're involving
exactly.
other enterprises to supply you
Uh-huh.
with the raw
Yeah.
material, for example, and
Yes. Right. For example, when I was at Doughty, I think I mentioned this with Ford Motor Company when we were doing business process engineering. Ford wanted to reduce the number of staff in their purchasing department because they had about 250 people and they wanted to reduce the numbers drastically. And one way of reducing that was to go for EDI. So they contacted all their suppliers and they said, look, from a particular month onwards, we will not be sending you paper orders, right? We will be sending you orders electronically through EDI. And obviously, Ford being the customer and being a huge customer, they dictated the format in which the transactions, in which the orders would pass. At the time, I was working at Doughty, and we couldn't afford to lose a customer like Ford, because Ford said, unless you can change your systems to do EDI with us, then we are going to find another supplier for rollings. We couldn't afford to lose them. So we had to change our systems, we had to accept that we do electronic data interchange with them, and we changed our systems to accept Ford's orders, send them delivery notes, send them invoices electronically, things like that. Now, when Volkswagen then decided to do something similar, the formats that we had with Ford were not applicable. Volkswagen gave us their own formats. So we had to change our system again, we had to update our system again to accept the formats sent by Volkswagen, right? And reformat them into the structure that our ordering system wanted those orders, as though somebody is keying them in manually. All right, so EDI, yes, EDI is a good medium, a good platform, right, throughout the supply chain. You can have EDI at both ends. You can communicate with your suppliers through EDI. You can communicate with your customers. Let's say you are selling to large supermarkets, to large wholesalers. Right? You can transact business with your customers using EDI as well. All right, so it's a good alternative to it. Nowadays, the majority use internet, right? Because as I said, it gives us a standard formats. We don't have to agree formats with people we are transacting business with. But yes, CDI is a good platform for supply chain management. I was talking about eGov. You can order certificates online. You can pay
your tax online. A lot of facilities that can be done online using e-commerce and communicating with government departments.
Okay, and then when you say that the company had to update the EDI itself, so you said you mentioned formatting, and I think that
Basically, we did not have to
policy and orders.
we did not have to update EDI. We had to update our systems. We had to upgrade our systems.
Okay,
All right,
but did it
because
involve software engineering, or is it just a question
with,
of templates, for example?
no software engineering development.
Okay.
Right, because obviously our system works on manual keying in of orders. All right, so when we used to key in orders, there was the structure of our tables. Our database had a certain structure. Now, when we started receiving orders via EDI,
You need to
right, we
accept.
had to translate the format of the EDI into the format of our database.
Okay, all right, that it's clear now. Thank you.
Okay, clear, Gary?
Yeah, so,
Okay. Right, the slide shows us the impact of e-commerce on trade. So you can see that between 1968 and 1995, right, 27 years, and trade increased by 8.4 percentage points. Right, it was 12.8% in 1968. It increased to 21% in 1995. This was before we had internet. So it took 27 years for global exports to grow by 8.4%. The same growth, 8.4%, with the advent of the internet, it just took 13 years. Right? So less than half the time that it took without internet. So e-commerce has had a huge impact on global trade. The growth of global trade has been accelerated, right? Has doubled with the advent of the internet. This shows world internet users up till a couple of years ago, right? So you can see 914, I think these are probably billions, up to 3896. For millions. But anyway, the increase in 14 years is enormous. Right? 6 times as much. How much? 4.5 times as much. Again, the growth, right, of global e-commerce in billions of dollars from 2011 in 6 years, from 857 billion to 2,000 billion, nearly 3 times as much, 2.5 times as much. Now, the history of electronic commerce as we know it today, right, wasn't the way that it started, obviously, because of technological advances. Now we have a much more robust e-commerce. But electronic commerce started in the mid-1990s. And when it came on the scene, it took off in a very big way. And between 1997 and 2000, over 12,000 companies, e-commerce companies, were started. People started seeing this as a very good platform to make money. So a huge number of companies, 12,000 companies, over 12,000 companies started up. This was just in 3 years. However, in the next 3 years, most of them went bust. You probably have heard the term the dot-com bubble or the dot-com crash. This happened between 2000 and 2003. Now, why was this bubble burst? Why was this crash? Most of the failures were because of the wrong business models. The people who started up those companies, most of them wanted to be there first, right? Corner the market, get rich quick, and then what happens, happens. Right? But their main idea, their main target, their main objective was to get rich quick. Now, the main problems, right, with the first appearance of e-commerce was, first of all, their business plan. most of these business plans were revolutionary or inspiring. However, they were hardly profitable. They were, most of them, run by people who were new to business. They were mostly from the technical side. They realized that they could make a killing. However, they went about it the wrong way. Another problem was that they didn't have their own capital. They had to get capital funding from somewhere else. So they spent other people's money, and they spent it unchecked because they wanted to gain market share as soon as possible. They wanted to be first on the market. They wanted to get a foothold on the market. Right? So in their hurry, right, they started spending money hand over fist. They had inexperienced teams, and their only objective was to grow quickly, right? Not grow in a sort of relaxed way, right? Grow over a period of time, but they wanted to grow quickly. Now, some companies started having financial problems. And when they started having financial problems, the financial backers started pulling their money, started asking for their capital back. Now, when a lot of companies started going bust, there was huge concern within the industry. And a lot of people who had top capital started getting cold feet. So they started calling in their loans. Some companies could have made it in the end, right? Some companies perhaps were on the right track. But because their capital now was frozen, right? And it was frozen because of so many failures in other companies in e-commerce, their investors pulled the plug. Their investors didn't give them any more money, or they started asking for their money back. Now, another problem with the first wave of e-commerce was that the technology was still immature. However, it didn't stop there. After 2003, we saw the second wave of e-commerce. And this is now where e-commerce stuck, right? This was 17 years ago, 18 years ago, right? And e-commerce is here to stay. Not only is here to stay, e-commerce is right, one of the mainstays of global commerce. And we've seen that a number of companies have made a success of it. Obviously, not all companies make a success. There are failures, even with the second wave. But with the second wave, we started seeing much more success stories. Now, these are some differences, especially the technological differences between the first wave and the second wave. Because technology evolved in those 6 years, that technology evolves quite a lot. And it's because of the evolution of technology that the second wave then made a bigger impact and was a bigger success than the first wave. First of all, with the first wave, we had very slow connections. Most connections were via dial-up modems. I don't know if you remember the times when, right, in order to go on the internet, I had one telephone line here, so it was either my surfing the internet or my wife talking to her mother, right? And sometimes we used to have big rows. I used to say, phone her up during the day when I'm at work. In the evening, then I'm going to use the telephone line because I want to browse the internet. So with the first wave, connections were via dial-up modems, and they were very, very slow. With the second wave, we started seeing broadband connections, right? Broadband networks, and over one telephone line, we could surf the internet and hold a voice conversation at the same time over the telephone, over one telephone line. And besides that, the speed increased, was about up to 20 times faster initially. Right nowadays, it is much, much faster. And with broadband connections, because we didn't need dial-up modems, we are always connected to the internet. the language that was used for websites in the first wave was mainly English. Now, although English is a very widely used language throughout the world, and there are other languages like Spanish, for example, Chinese, Portuguese, that are also very well diffused. And with the second wave, we started seeing websites that could be customized to the language of the user. Right? Nowadays, you go into a website, you might see those flags at the top, right, where you can change the language that the website is communicating with you. Again, website rendering, with the first wave, it was mostly static. There was little or no interaction with customers. Companies had a website, background of the company, perhaps some information about the directors of the company, some information about the products. But basically, that was that. It didn't change a lot. If you go into the website, or if you went during the first wave into the website of a company and then revisit it a couple of weeks later, more or less you'll find that it hasn't changed. The same information. With the second wave, the websites became dynamic and interactive. Nowadays, we have also social communication with websites. And you go into a company's website and you get a pop-up. Right? So I'll tell you, look, we're here if you'd like to talk to us. Right? So again, the content became more dynamic. With e-commerce, right, we start looking at the company's catalog, company stock holdings. If you are ordering from a supermarket, right, you get all the products that they have, or nearly all the products that they have, and automatically they tell you whether they're out of stock or not. So businesses and customers can communicate, again, because of the ease of communication. The use of email in the first wave, email was generally unstructured. With the second wave, we started seeing customized emails that will enable automation. You send an email to an organization, it doesn't need someone to read that email and action it. Right? That email can be parsed using software, and your communication can be fed into an information system. Revenue generation, how we make money. With the first wave, it was mainly reliant on advertising. The more popular your website was, the more you can charge for people to place adverts on your website. With the second wave, revenue generation became more flexible, selling over the internet. Besides advertising, right, there are alternative revenue generating streams. We can get revenue in different ways. There is faster reaction to consumer trends. Dynamic pricing, for example. You keep an eye on what your competitors are selling similar products for, then you can keep your products in you can keep your products with the same, with a relative cost to your competitors. The other point there is capital. Right? With the first wave, many new companies relied on outside investor capital. And that was one of the problems when these investors started getting cold feet. They're starting pulling their money back. Right? Certain companies could have made it, but they were starved of capital, so they had to fold. With the second wave, we see that established companies started coming up with their own internet website offerings, right? And established companies can fund e-commerce from their own capital. They don't need to go and ask for bank loans. They don't need to find financiers. They don't need to find outside capital in most cases. Right? So it's their own capital. There are certain barriers to e-commerce growth. First of all, technology challenges. Well, if you get it wrong, you may lose revenue and reputation. Some years ago, there was a company that released some codes, right? And they said they wanted to start selling some new products over the internet, And in order to make people, in order as a promotion, right, to get people to buy, they created some promotion codes. However, these codes should have been, one code should have been used once and that's that. But they had a flaw in their system. And a particular code, and any particular code, got accepted more than once. And people got wise to it, right? And this company lost massive revenue because instead of selling one item with code A, for example, right, at a discount, code A was used to buy, right, and multiple items. Okay, so instead of giving a discount on one item, they ended up giving a discount on 50 items, 100 items. Right? So you can imagine how that drained their revenue. And obviously, this company lost its reputation as well because people were laughing at them. Look what they've done. Look how stupid, what a loophole they left. Right? Lisa, order your products, buy something before they identify that loophole and close it. Another problem is we need to redesign business processes. The business processes that we have for normal trading, for brick and mortar shops, right, for our selling via normal outlets, are not applicable when we talk about e-commerce. Business processes have to be different. So there are challenges in redesigning business processes. Although we have improved a lot, there are still issues of trust and security. Some people still do not trust the internet. They will never order anything over the internet because they are afraid of giving credit card details, for example. There is a lack of effective legal frameworks, especially where two persons are transacting business from different countries, right? And those different countries have different laws. So if there is litigation between buyer and seller, there is always that question mark, which law should apply? The law of the country where the supplier lives or the law of the country where the buyer lives? And that can be made even more interesting if the server is located in a different country. So there are three different countries, three different laws, which one should apply. Another barrier is unproven business models. We are going to have a look at some successful business models that we have seen in e-commerce in the past. However, people are still trying to come up with new business models, and they not always work. Sometimes you might come up with a business model that hasn't been proven, and it doesn't work, and obviously you're going to lose money over that site. Now, some differences between traditional commerce and e-commerce. Traditional successful business models will not necessarily work in e-commerce, and some businesses are better suited than others. For example, books, music, software. These are items where we can have a digital product, which are fantastic for e-commerce. There are other businesses that are less suited to e-commerce, for example, works of art. If you're going to buy a work of art, right, without seeing it, without having an expert check it out, right, relying on the seller to send you an authentic work of art, that is very, very risky. And there are other businesses that are suited to both traditional and e-commerce. Like, for example, banks. You have internet banking, and okay, we have especially one of the main banks in Malta is very keen on closing a lot of branches, but people still go to transact their business in bank offices. And there are other businesses that need a mix of traditional and e-commerce. For example, selling houses, real estate. You can do a lot to identify a house, right? Using the internet, going into estate agents' websites and looking at properties that they have for sale. properties that interest you when you look at the photos or when you see them, when you see just the photos, you might say, no, this is not good for me. Right? But then to finalize the sale, we cannot finalize the sale using the internet. It is too complex. And we need notaries, we need bank officials. Right? So we can't close the sale using the internet. And we can utilize the internet to save on search costs, but we can't use the internet wholly for the whole transaction. Again, these are some comparatives between digital markets and traditional markets. Right? I'm going to go through a couple of them in later slides, so I'm not going to read through all of this. So, in fact, some of those are going to translate into the main benefits to consumers. The first one is reduced information asymmetry. Now, asymmetry means that there is an imbalance. And information asymmetry means that there is an imbalance in information. The seller knows much more about the product that he's selling than the customer. And the seller knows his product inside out. You as a customer will not know that product. If you want to buy, a camera, you have to go, before you had e-commerce, you have to go to the agents in Malta of the main camera manufacturers, Canon, Nikon, whatever. And each agent will extol the good points of his product and probably will denigrate, will give a bad review to the products of his competitors. So you go around 4 or 5 agents and you end up more confused than you had started off. You might be lucky to get brochures, you might be lucky to get technical sheets, and then you try to figure out which is the best camera for you. Nowadays, with the internet, that information asymmetry, that imbalance in the information, has grown much, much smaller. It hasn't been completely eradicated. But nowadays, with the internet, for example, you can go onto sites that do comparatives. You say, I am interested in model A, model B, and model C. And they will compare the specifications of those 3 models, right, on a number of technical features, and at a glance, you can compare them. So you are much better informed. Oh, this is better than this. This has a longer battery life, for example. This has more memory, whatever. You can also find reviews on these products, right, which is easier to find with e-commerce, with the internet, than it was before we had e-commerce. Before we had e-commerce, you had to buy a specialist magazine, for example. I don't know whether it is still around, but in our days, we used to get Which magazine. They used to have articles comparing televisions, for example, articles comparing fridges, whatever. You're going to say something, Floyd? Okay, so that's reduced information asymmetry. Customers are now better informed than they were, so they can make a better choice. Dynamic pricing, varying the price of the products because the customer is better informed and can get a better deal elsewhere. You keep an eye on what your competitors are asking for their products. If you think you are non-competitive, if you think that your prices are too high, then reduce your prices. The third benefit is disintermediation, removing the middleman. Before we had the internet, if you wanted to import something from abroad, right, it was very difficult to identify suppliers, find suppliers. And there were people whose job was specifically to be agents. They were the go-between the suppliers abroad and the importers locally, the customers locally. And the agents used to get a hefty commission. Right? They became very, very rich. Nowadays, with the internet, we don't need these intermediaries, we don't need the middlemen, because you can find the suppliers that you want over the internet. You can search the internet and find where, right, from where to get your raw materials, from where to get your components. So we don't need the middleman. Some business benefits of e-commerce. Here we distinguish between the tangible benefits and intangible benefits. Tangible benefits are those benefits that translate into euros, that translate into a monetary figure. Intangible benefits are benefits that we know that accrue through e-commerce. However, we cannot cost them. We cannot put a financial value to them. And tangible benefits are like increased sales. Right? We know how much we're selling over our e-commerce site. Right? So those are hopefully additional sales. Although we have to be careful because sometimes those sales are a substitute of sales that would normally be done through our brick and mortar shop. For example, a supermarket. Right? A supermarket, if it has an e-commerce function, it knows how much money is coming in through e-commerce, how the value of orders coming in through e-commerce. But people ordering using e-commerce could be people who would normally come into the supermarket in person to do their shopping. So it is a substitute for what you normally sell. We reduce market costs. It is much easier to reach the market with e-commerce, advertising, things like that. Before we had the internet, there were certain companies, they were called catalog companies. They used to send you a catalog with all their products, with the prices, and then you can order from the catalog. Now that catalog took, right, was very, very expensive to produce, very expensive to print. You can imagine a 300-page catalog in color, right, and then sending it out to prospective customers. The costs were enormous. With the internet, with e-commerce, right, those costs are all saved. Those costs are reduced. Supply chain cost reductions. Right, we reduce the cost in our supply chain from start to finish. We reduce the cost of administration as well. Right? So things like even with EDI, for example, right? You don't need to have people printing orders. You don't need people faxing orders. These are done automatically. Now, the intangible benefits, some intangible benefits, customers expect us to have an online presence. Nowadays, even if you're going for an interview, the first thing that you do is look up that company's website, because that can give you a lot of information about the company itself. Do they have a smart website? Is it appealing? Does it look like a serious company, or is their website amateurish? Right? It might point to the fact that that company is a bit iffy. Yeah? Better corporate image and enhanced brand image. Right? So again, by having a presence on the internet, on e-commerce, then you can enhance your image, your company's image, and the image of the brands that you are selling. More rapid and responsive marketing communications. It is much easier to reach your market. So, right, there is an advantage there, but can we cost that advantage? Can we know how much money that is earning us? Quicker response to customer needs, knowing what customers want. So we can respond much more quickly to their requirements. Improved customer service. Right? Customers can talk to us, right, over our social network sites, perhaps, over our chat functionality in our website. Right? So we are giving them a better service. We are giving them faster feedback. If they're coming up with a query, if they're coming up with a complaint, we can immediately look into that complaint and give them an early answer. Better management of customer information. with e-commerce, we are amassing a lot of information about customers and potential customers. So we can manage that information better. Now, some advantages of e-commerce: reduce costs for handling inquiries, quotations, etc. And certain companies that you can build your own quotation. Right? For example, there are certain catering establishments. If you want to order a party at home, right, you can go into their website. Sorry about that, but my grandson is having a difficult period. He's crying. And so you can come up with your own quotation. You don't need to go and ask, right, that confectioner to give you a quotation. You can look up that quotation from his website. Consumers have a wider choice. Right? We have much more suppliers to go to than we would normally have with traditional commerce. We can research products, companies, and services in detail. So again, much more information about what we're buying and from whom we are buying. Electronic payments are easier to monitor and audit than cash. Right? Cash, a lot of companies are trying to avoid getting paid in cash because cash has a lot of problems to control and to audit. You might be paid with counterfeit notes. You might be given the wrong amount. You might be giving out the wrong change. Your cashiers might be held up on the way to the bank to deposit that money. And so electronic payments are much better to control. Products are made available in remote areas, certain areas that are not serviced by normal shops. Right? They can sell or they can obtain supplies from suppliers via e-commerce. Now, some disadvantages of e-commerce: it is difficult to calculate the return on investment. I mentioned the supermarket before. They have come up with an e-commerce facility. It has cost them so much. It is difficult to calculate the return on that investment. They know how much sales are coming in through their e-commerce site, but is that substitution sales? Are they all new sales? It is difficult to integrate traditional systems with e-commerce systems. Traditional systems, legacy systems, would be written in older technology, and it would be very difficult to try to integrate them with new systems, with modern systems. And another disadvantage is that businesses face legal and cultural barriers with e-commerce. Legal barriers, I've already mentioned the fact that countries have different laws, so it is very difficult to see which law is going to apply when there is litigation. And there are also cultural differences. People in other countries, for example, clothing, right? Clothing, the fashions might not be the same in different cultures, in different countries. Now, some unique features of e-commerce: first of all, its ubiquity. It is available anytime, anywhere, 24/7 by 365. So we have created new market spaces, and we have become more customer-centric rather than being business-centric. The customer has now really been placed in our focus, and we have reduced transaction costs for both businesses and customers. The global reach, right? We can reach new markets, we can reach new customers. Okay, so this is a benefit for customers because they have a wider choice. However, it will be a problem for the sellers because their competition has increased. Right? But businesses benefit because they can reach new customers. We have universal standards. I was talking when I mentioned EDI, I said EDI necessitated pre-agreed formats, but with e-commerce, we have universal standards. Businesses don't need to have proprietary systems. Businesses can reach anybody, anywhere. Right? We don't need to have special tools. Richness, the wealth of information that is available to customers and to merchants themselves, is opening up new opportunities. Even merchants have much more information nowadays. When we do web analytics, seeing who has landed on our websites, and which pages they have visited, and the sequence of visits for those pages, right? It gives businesses a lot of insight. It gives businesses a lot of information. Interactivity, right? Businesses use a number of ways to communicate with customers: input forms, shopping carts, chats over the internet. Right? Those are all ways where companies interact with their customers. We have greater information density. Consumers can enjoy price and cost transparency, so they can compare, right, prices from different sources, and they can shop accordingly. There are certain sites, for example, if you want to buy a particular book, rather than going into the websites of 4 or 5 different publishers, there are websites that will tell you, if you are looking for a particular book, that will tell you where that book is available from. Right? And it will tell you the prices at which it is available. So at a glance, without having to go into 4 different websites, at a glance you can compare the prices for different suppliers, and you can decide where you're going to order your book from. Personalization and customization. Right? So again, because the relationship between customer and supplier has improved, suppliers know more about customers' particular requests, particular likings. Okay, so the supplier can give customer a personalized service. Use of social technology. Social networks, initially social networks, were set up so that people with similar interests will get together. Now, businesses are using social networks so that they can communicate and keep in touch with their customers. Any questions so far? Let's stop for a 5-minute break, please.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll see you in 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, sir.
Right.